by Shadow Bunny Dragon. Now you knead the dough like so. Audrey's voice floated in from the kitchen, all the way into the living room, where presently Vernon and Dorian were sitting. There you go. Just like that. You're a pro just like your granny. Vernon smiled as his tail started to thump at the sounds of his pups laughing and chatting with his mother. When Audrey had proposed teaching the kids how to bake a pie, they had jumped at the chance. Dawn had been quick to whip her phone out to start recording, continuing to document as many happy family moments as she could. It sounds like Ma's teaching 'em how to bake her pumpkin pie, Vernon said to the older white wolf. Dorian let out a low, rumbling chuckle. Your mother's been looking forward to finally getting to meet 'em, he said. And what about you, Pa? Vernon asked, smiling. He noticed the brief pause Dorian took before answering. Well, of course I'm excited to finally be a grandpa, and that I get to meet my grandpups, Dorian said, his gaze shifting a little. Is something wrong, Pa? Vernon asked. Well, no, Vern, nothing's wrong. Dorian started to rub the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. I was just wondering about your littlest pup. Lily? Vernon asked. What about her? Have you and Dawn managed to figure out just what she is? Dorian bluntly asked. Vernon blinked. No, but Dawn thinks that her friends at the ZPD might be able to uncover something. Oh, good, Dorian said, looking about as awkward as the moment itself had become. But we won't know for certain if we'll learn anything, Vernon continued, not liking where this conversation was going. Not that it matters. She's our pup, just like her brother and sister. The white wolf's icy blue eyes winced. Well, of course, Vern, it's just that, Dorian trailed off, looking unsure about what he wanted to say. What, Pa? I don't know exactly, Dorian explained, meeting his son's gaze. But ever since y'all sent us those first pictures, I've been getting this feeling in the back of my mind, like I've seen something like her before. Only for the life of me, I can't remember where. You mean you've encountered her species before? No, son, and if I would, remember if I did. There's just something about her that's nagging the back of me and my mind. But as hard as I try to recall it, it just slips away. You'll tell us if you do remember, right, Pa? Well, of course, Vern, Dorian said with a smile. The second I think of it, I'll call you and Dawn right up and let you know. It was just then that Audrey proudly walked in, once more carrying Lily, Trevor, and Alice in her arms. Dawn followed behind, still filming. Well, Audrey started over the giggling of Lily and Trevor. They're all naturals when it comes to baking. Alice said, squirming a little in Audrey's arms. Grandma? Yes, sweet pea? The she-wolves asked. Can I get down now? Alice asked. Aww, Audrey said in mock disappointment before giving one more hug, setting the three down. Where's the bathroom? The black pup asked. I'll show you, sweetie, Dawn said as she tapped on her phone and put it away. She then took Alice's paw, which made the inside of the pup's ears blush, and started to lead her down the hall. Vernon then found himself with a lap full of giggling children. We made pies, Daddy, Lily said excitedly. So I heard, Vernon said, wrapping his arms around them both. We made one each, Trevor said, letting out an involuntary bleat of joy. Well, I can't wait to try each one after dinner tonight," Vernon said, ruffling Lily's head mane and Trevor's head floof. Audrey stood there and wiped away a happy tear while Dorian smiled, but found his eyes kept focusing on Lily. He felt that slight sense of unease return, but pushed it back down. They were interrupted by the doorbell ringing, making all of the Canids' ears perk up. "I wonder who that is," Audrey said, as she walked out of the living room. She opened the front door, surprised to see a familiar wolf and badger standing there on the welcome mat, both wearing backpacks much larger than themselves. "Lily? Honey? We, weren't expecting you two for another week," she said as she blinked in confusion. "I was able to get off work ahead of time, Mama," Ulrich said, his tail wagging. "And we heard about the sightings and the mysterious campfires, and knew that the investigation couldn't wait any longer," Ulrich said with manic excitement. "Lamb's sake, Uli," Audrey said, stepping aside to let the two in. "That's just some kids out partying." "That's what they want you to believe." "Uli, who's they?" Audrey asked. "The secret society of shaved simians." Ulrich pointed a finger skyward as he said this in triumph. "You see, thanks to patterns involving chemtrails, I've discovered that there's a secret plot to observe and potentially invade the northern, and maybe even the southern, Meadowlands, where the shaved apes will then attempt to abduct, eliminate, and disguise themselves as various mammals." "Or it's just a cat squatch," Honey interjected with a smirk. "We currently have a bet going as to who's right. Loser has to do whatever the other says." "And what happens if you're both wrong?" Audrey asked. She had been surprised at how much she had come to enjoy the badger who had become the mate of Ulrich. She loved all of her sons and daughters-in-laws equally, but she would be lying to claim that she hadn't been worried about Ulrich, especially when he would go off his meds. But Honey seemed to have an uncanny ability to rein him mostly back in. Honey shrugged. "A do-over with the next conspiracy." "Well, there isn't a conspiracy here," Audrey said as she showed them in. "It's just going to be some teenagers that you'll find. Or they'll just look like teenagers," Ulrich supplied. Ulrich was cut off by a low growl. His ears laid flat, and his tail tucked itself between his legs as he looked up at the angry face of his mother. It wasn't quite her glare, which all knew to fear, but it still rendered him petrified. "There ain't gonna be any more talk like that, Ulrich," Audrey said in a low voice. "She is a little girl, her name is Lily, and she's your niece." "But can I at least collect some samples, Mama?" Ulrich asked, a tremble in his voice. "I'm pretty sure the answer is a no," Honey interjected. She gave Audrey a week, just as Ulrich started out a dejected, "Understood." The she-wolf's muzzle broke out into a smile, her tail swishing back and forth. "Well, all right then. Let's go and introduce you two," Audrey said as she turned. Ulrich looked to Honey and let out a whine. "Don't look at me, Uli," the badger said as she shrugged out of her pack and set down a bag she was carrying. "I'm in agreement with your mom on this one." "You always take her side," he grumbled in response. "Only when she's right," Honey said with a playful smirk. The two walked together towards the living room, where they could hear Audrey's voice, along with Vernon's. "Said they weren't going to be here until next week?" "Well, they seem to have had a bit of change of plans," Audrey said, looking a little sheepish. "Kids," she said, addressing Trevor and Lily, "I'd like for you to meet your Uncle Ulrich and your Auntie Honey." Ulrich entered, Honey leading him by the arm. "Hello," he said, twitching a little. His gaze immediately zeroed in on the strange, little, mostly furless mammal sitting on his brother's lap. He briefly took note of the little lamb boy looking at him, but its focus was on the mystery mammal. Assuming that she even is a mammal, was the thought that ran through his head at that moment, followed by an idea of how she might possibly be a reptilian, or even part cephalopod. "Hi, Uncle Ulrich," Trevor said, giving him a wave. "Hi, Auntie Honey," Lily said, feeling shy and tucking her face a little between Trevor's head floof. "Hello there, kids," the badger said, in a friendly voice. "Hey, Uli. Hey, Honey," Vernon greeted the couple. "Vernon, wait, wasn't there a third one?" Ulrich said, suddenly looking around. "Yeah, Alice," Vernon explained. "Don showed her where the bathroom is." "And you're sure that that's not just some part of some plot to observe me in secret?" Ulrich said, checking behind himself as though the two were going to be right there. Vernon rolled his eyes just as his ears picked up. He looked down at his lap to see his youngest pup sitting there, giggling while looking at her energetic uncle. "You and Mommy were right, Daddy," she said, turning to face him. "Uncle Uli is silly." Ulrich froze when he heard that, and turned to face Vernon, who was now rubbing the back of his neck. "Silly? Is that what you've been telling your pups? Silly? I am a serious researcher, Vern. Just last month, after finding a message hidden in the pattern of a spiderweb I almost walked into, I went looking for a unicorn, and I almost caught him on camera, too." "Wait, you mean that wildebeest truck driver who punched you out?" Vernon asked, taking a moment to try and remember the event in question. "You're right, Uli. Where are my manners? I should let my pups form their own conclusions. Hey now, he was in disguise, and I almost got him to show me his secret horn." Dorian rolled his eyes as Vernon looked to be holding back laughter, while Audrey politely coughed into her paw, loud enough to be heard. "Let's not discuss that incident in front of the pups, okay?" she said, grateful that Honey was distracting Trevor and Lily, whom she had led off of the couch in Vernon's lap a little bit away from the adult conversation, with a discussion about an upcoming game she'd gotten some leaked footage of. Not that Audrey understood any of that techno-whatsits. Ulrich whined, but was quickly silenced by a look from Dorian, then nodded. "I'll send your mom and dad the video later, okay?" Honey said with a smile. "Okay, Auntie Honey," Trevor said excitedly. Lily seemed about as enthusiastic as her brother, although the discussion of the game had gone a little bit over her head. Honey smiled and ruffled their heads before turning to address her mate. "Come on, Lily. We need to get all unpacked," she said. "All right," Ulrich said, giving Lily a wide berth as he started to follow Honey, giving her a few more side glances as he exited the room. "I hope that the storm front doesn't negatively affect our equipment." "Nah, once we get everything set up, it'll all be fine," came Honey's voice from the hall. "Why do I get the feeling that that ain't gonna end well?" Dorian asked. "Because Uli's plans hardly end any other way, Pa," Vernon chimed in. "Oh, hush, you two," Audrey said, just as Dawn returned with Alice, this time not holding her paw. "We just encountered Ulrich and Honey," DU said. "I take it that them meeting Trevor and Lily was, interesting?" Alice had taken the opportunity to sneak up behind her brother and sister in order to tackle them. "Heh, could have been worse," Vernon said while smiling as their pups rolled around on the floor, all trying to pin each other. Dorian smirked at the sight while Audrey cooed. "Oh, kids," Dawn said, making the trio pause and look toward her. "Let's save the roughhousing for outside, okay?" "Okay, Mommy," Lily and Trevor chorused, while Alice said, "Sure." "Oh, please, Dawn," Audrey said with a wave of her paw. "That don't even compare to what Vernon and his brothers got up to when they were around their age range, and even when they were older." The she-wolf was looking in Vernon's direction. Hey, kids," he said, hopping up from where he was sitting. "How about we go explore the cornfield?" "Okay," Lily said, heading for the door, prompting a still rowdy and giggling Alice to give chase, followed by Trevor. Vernon followed behind them, his tail wagging while his mother rolled her eyes. Dawn put her hooves to her muzzle as she let out a light laugh. "Just like his old man," Audrey said. "What's that supposed to mean?" the law wolf asked. "How about all them times you took the boys outside to drill them on police takedowns?" Dawn started to head outside as well, just to make sure that the children would be careful not to fall into the stream or get lost in the cornfield. "I was just making sure that what I was teaching them was sticking, Audie. And that just so happened to be right when I wanted to have a little chat with you about the tree incident." Coincidence? The little Ewe could hear the sheepish smile on her father-in-law's muzzle. When she exited out the front door, she saw Vernon sitting there on the porch swing, gazing out at the cornfield, listening to the laughter of their pups. Dawn took a seat next to him, taking one of his large paws in her small hooves. They sat together, occasionally checking the time on Dawn's phone. They sat there for a while, once spotting Ulrich lugging something made of bright blue cloth out to the woods, hurrying back. "It's just about time for Zach and Vanna's shift to end, so I'm expecting that they'll both be along shortly," Vernon said after they checked the time once again. Dawn nodded and gave his paw a happy squeeze. "Kids!" she called out. There was some more laughter before Trevor, followed by Alice and Lily, popped out from within the cornstalks. Dawn smiled and beckoned the pups over. "You're going to be meeting your Uncle and Auntie Zach and Vanna real soon." "And they're just gonna love y'all," Vernon said. "So how's about we all head inside and wait for 'em? Maybe we can all try those pies of yours." That put more of a hustle in the excited children's steps as they hurried inside. Dawn looked them each over as they ran past, checking to make sure that they hadn't gotten hurt, despite Vernon's earlier assurance. After Audrey served the pups a slice of their pies, they didn't have to wait long before Dorian's ears perked, picking up the sounds of a tire pulling up on the gravel driveway. "They're here," he said, getting up to head to the door. He sidestepped around Lily, who was busy with her Omo coloring book, humming as she colored in one of the ostriches picking cherries. She reached for her crowns, and didn't notice how when her paw came close to the white wolf's leg, he shied away a bit. It was ever so slight, but one set of eyes caught it. Unbeknownst to Dorian, his mate saw, and frowned a little, making a mental note to speak to him about it. Dorian made it to the door just in time to see his son and his daughter-in-law stepping up the porch steps. He greeted them, and Zach, as was usual for him, was excited to meet his nieces and nephew. Vanna, while stoic, seemed a little nervous to the older law wolf. With a wide smile on his muzzle, Zach hurried into the living room, taking in the sight of Trevor, who was presently sitting in Audrey's lap, laughing at the pictures in the photo album she was showing him, while Alice was play wrestling with Lily, who was now giggling, her coloring book forgotten for the time being. "Hey, pups," Zach said, opening his arms wide. "I'm your Uncle Zach." He then bent down and, much like his mother had done earlier in the day, picked Alice and Lily up in a hug. Lily was quick to reciprocate, while Alice had let out another surprised yip before blushingly returning the hug as well. He then set them down to look over the two. "Now I take that you're Alice," he said to the big black pup, before turning his attention to her sister. "And you're Lily." "Uh-huh," Lily said excitedly. "And I'd be willing to bet that you're Trevor," Zach said, his tail a happy blur. Trevor shyly nodded. Audrey wrapped a free arm around him and gave him a gentle squeeze. "You'll have to get in line, Zach," Audrey said with a wink. "Grandmas get priority when it comes to hugs." "Aww," Zach said in mock disappointment, before leaning down to stage whisper to the girls. "Don't worry, I'll get him just as soon as Ma lets down her guard." Alice and Lily giggled, all the while Dawn filmed. Vernon and Dorian chuckled at the display, and Vanna stood in the doorway, nervously shuffling her feet. She then noticed all eyes in the room were upon her, and Zach was beckoning her forward. "And here's your Auntie Vanna." Lily was standing closest to the tigress, and stood there staring. Vanna fidgeted a little, still feeling nervous. Internally, she was afraid that she might be scary for the pups, and was worried that she would be known as the scary aunt. She was starting to look towards her maid for help when she heard the soft voice of Lily. "Wow, you're pretty." Vanna wasn't expecting that, especially considering how self-conscious she was about her appearance. The semi-regular occurrence of citizens mistaking her for a male officer being a factor there as well. But with that one statement, a blush spread across her face, and she let out an inadvertent happy shuff. Zack heard it, and his tail resumed wagging, knowing that that was a sign of his kitten's happiness. Thank you, Lily," Vanna said, a smile spreading across her blushing face when Lily reached out her arms for a hug. Bending down, the tigress wrapped both of her arms around her youngest niece and gently hugged her. With the ice successfully broken, it didn't take long for the pups to warm up to their uncle and auntie. Zack was quick to ask them about the things they enjoyed doing, with Vanna chiming in. As they talked, Ulrich could occasionally be seen poking his head in, sometimes to stare at Lily, other times to stare at Dawn and Trevor. He looked about to say something when Honey dragged him off to look at something. It was approaching dinner time when Dorian stood up and stretched a little, saying something about wanting to change out of his uniform. As he stepped around Lily again, who was too busy showing Vanna a picture she was drawing, Audrey saw once again him shying away from getting too close, and frowned. The she-wolf stood up and promptly followed her maid out of the room. "Do y'all want to tell me what that was all about?" she asked, once she was sure that they were out of earshot of everyone. Dorian turned, looking surprised, his ears splaying flat on his head. "What you mean, darling?" he asked, knowing exactly what his mate was referring to, but trying to play innocent. Audrey snorted and rolled her eyes. "Every time Lily gets near you, you shy away from her like she's contagious or something." The white wolf winced at that. Well, Audie, I'm not sure what you think He was cut off by a low growl. Audrey's face took on a dark look as Dorian knew was the onset of the glare. Okay. He held up both paws defensively. Audrey's features softened, but she was still looking stern as she stood there, arms crossed, clearly waiting for an explanation. Dorian sighed and ran a paw through the fur on his head. "It's just that she's something that no one knows anything about. Sure, part of me feels like I've seen something like her before. For the life of me, I can't remember anything other than that. It's just a little unsettling for me, darling." Audrey was silent for a moment. The only sound audible was a nearby clock ticking. "Someone," Audrey said in a low voice. "Excuse me?" Dorian asked, confused. "She's someone, not something," Audrey said. "That's what I meant to say, Audie," Dorian said, once again holding up both paws. "She's also our grandpup," Audrey continued, as though Dorian hadn't spoken. "And she's a sweet little girl who hasn't done anything wrong and doesn't deserve for you to flinch away from her like she was made of night howlers. You're lucky she, nor anyone else for that matter, hadn't noticed how you've been acting." I know." Dorian looked down at his paws, having started to wring them. "I'm gonna try to interact with her more." A smile crept up her muzzle. "That's more like it. I can tell you that she, just like her brother and sister, were really nervous about meeting us. Remember what Clover said when she called?" Dorian nodded, still clearly feeling guilty. "I do, darling, and I mean it. I'm gonna try and be a better grandpappy." After he said that, Dorian found himself embraced by his mate, her tail wagging. "Good! Besides, we can't have her and Cameron become their favorite Gammy and Pappy easily," she said, prompting a chuckle from Dorian as he hugged her back. "It's not a competition, Audie," he said, just knowing that she was rolling her eyes in response. "Oh, of course it's not, Dory," was her canned response. Having that taken care of, Audrey let Dorian go to change out of his work clothes, while she decided to go get dinner started. Vanna and Vernon offered to help her, while Zack played with the pups, having already kept his promise of hugging his nephew when Audrey wasn't looking, much to Trevor's delight. Dawn filmed with a feeling of warmth in her chest at how happy her lambs were to be meeting members of their family. The memory of when she had first come to the ranch and how Toltemus that had been briefly flitted across her mind. But Dawn was determined to make sure that this first visit was one that would absolutely be a happy experience for her children. Dorian returned shortly after, now in just a flannel shirt and jeans. He took in the sight of Zack mock wrestling with Alice, as Trevor now sat in Vanna's lap, the tigress looking a little uncomfortable, but definitely doing her best to feign excitement as he showed her his collection of samurai snake action figures. Dorian chuckled before he was surprised by a slight tugging on his pant leg, and looked down to see Lily. She stood there, smiling trepidatiously. "Yes, a sweet pea?" Dorian asked, feeling a little awkward, but pressing on. Lily held up a piece of paper for him to take. "I made you this, Grandpa," she said, her voice filled with the hope that he would enjoy her drawing. Dorian took the paper and saw a picture of himself in his sheriff uniform, complete with sunglasses, smiling in front of the cornfield. He beamed with a twinkle in his eye as he admired how well drawn it was for a 6-year-old. "Well, now," he said as he reached down to ruffle her head mane, "this here's a work of art if I've ever seen one." "You like it, Grandpa?" she asked, delighted. "I sure do. Why, I think you could have a career as a police sketch artist," Dorian said, meaning it. "Really?" Lily asked. "What's that?" "It's someone who listens to the description of a mammal and then draws them, so that the police and everyone else knows who to keep an eye out for," Dorian said. With a wide smile, she reached over and hugged Dorian's shins. He stiffened a little and reached down to pat her head, trying to push past the unsettled feeling in his gut. "Now, how about I show y'all how to perform some police takedowns?" he said loud enough for all 3 children to hear. "Okay," Alice said as she stood up. Trevor looked excited and hopped off of Vanna's lap, while Lily let go of his leg and started bouncing in place, thrilled to have her other new grandpa show her something. "All right now, before I show you, y'all gotta remember, this is only for you to use in self-defense only. Got it?" Dorian asked seriously. Once all 3 pups nodded, his tail wagged a bit. "All right then. Zack, come here. Pa, maybe Don and Vernon don't want their pups to learn something like this just yet," Zack tried, looking suddenly nervous. "Oh, me and Puppy discussed it on the way here," Dawn chimed in as she turned her phone to where Dorian was walking towards Zack. "And we have no problem with it." Maybe you won't try it out on Vanna then? You know, to show the pups that it can work on a larger opponent." That got him a light swat on the back of the head from his mate. "Quit your stalling, boy, and come here," Dorian said. Zack let out a small whine and then stepped up. "Now, watch closely, pups. This one I'll show you a few times so you can understand it better." Vernon had come out of the kitchen to see what the several yelps he heard were all about, and he saw his paw with Zack on the floor, pinned underneath him. "See what I mean, pups? Try as he might, he's not going to get away. Of course, right about now is when the cuff or the zip ties get used," Dorian said. "If you want, Pa, I can go grab one of your spares," Vernon offered with a smirk. "Traitor!" Zack cried as he continued to wiggle. "Thanks, Vern. I'd appreciate it," Dorian said. A few more takedowns and holds later, and they were all informed that dinner was ready. Dawn made sure that all of her lambs washed up first before they sat down to what was yet another amazing meal by her mother-in-law. After dinner, Dorian, much to Zack's despair, showed them a few more takedowns, which of course Dawn also got on camera, before he started to tell them some funny stories from work. The sky outside darkened, and Honey and Ulrich periodically exited the house, carrying different electronic equipment. Soon enough, Dawn noticed that it was getting close to the children's bedtime. After each hugging their uncle and auntie and their grandma and grandpa, Vernon started to herd them upstairs to the guest bedroom so that they could get ready for bed. He was happy that his mother had lifted the rule against sons and their mates not staying in their same room, not only so that he could cuddle his ewe all night, but also to ensure that they were not too far away from the pups, something he was quick to reassure them about as he tucked them in, the three sharing a large bed. "I know that it can be weird going to sleep in a new place, but me and Mommy will be right next door, okay?" "Okay, Daddy," Trevor said, rubbing his eyes with his hooves. He was lying next to Alice, who was trying to hide Princess Fluffington behind her back, one of the gray stuffed bunny's ears having flopped down to the side. Lily cuddled close to her brother and nodded to Vernon. "Now, how about a story?" Lily and Trevor both readily, if not sleepily, agreed, while Alice tried to play it off that she was only going along with what her younger siblings wanted. Later that night, after Zach and Vanna had gone home, Dawn and Vernon stayed up a little longer, chatting with Vernon's parents. When Dorian had showed off the picture of him, he got a playful swat in the arm from Audrey, who wanted to know why he got one, but Grandma hadn't yet. She then took the picture and put it where it would be prominently on display in the kitchen, on the fridge. It wasn't much longer before Vernon and Dawn turned in for the night, followed shortly by Audrey and Dorian. It was in the middle of the night when Dorian got up to get himself a glass of water. Dorian yawned as he walked down the darkened hall, stopping as his ears pricked up and heard the sound of sniffling and scratching. He tracked it to its source, the hall closet. He grabbed the knob and tried to pull the door open. The rising humidity had a tendency to make the door stick, so he had to give it a few tugs before it popped open fully. Inside, he saw Lily, tears running down her cheeks. "Lily?" Dorian asked, confused. "What are you doing in there?" Lily sniffed and wiped her eyes before answering, tear stains having run down her furless cheeks. I got up to use the bathroom, and when I came out, I couldn't find the bedroom. I thought this was it. When I realized that it was a closet, I tried to get out. The door wouldn't open," she said, hugging herself. "Okay. It's okay, sweet pea," he said, at first still feeling a little awkward around her. She reached out for him, and his paws flinched back a bit. The look of hurt on the child's face, even in the darkened hall, was enough to make Dorian feel like kicking himself. He then reached out and scooped Lily up into his arms. "Okay. How about your grandpappy tells you some stories of when your papa was a pup and got himself stuck?" Dorian said, as he carried Lily downstairs. Daddy got stuck in places?" Lily asked, her sniffles beginning to subside as her curiosity grew. "And things," Dorian said with a deep chuckle as he made his way to his study. He took a seat behind his desk in his large leather chair and settled Lily in his lap. "I remember one time I entered the kitchen, hearing this whining sound. There, your papa was no older than 4, with a jar of peanut butter stuck on his muzzle." Dorian smiled at the laugh this brought out of Lily. "He was so scared, I practically had to hold him down to pull it off. When I did, he was still licking all around the outside and inside of his muzzle. Took him a big glass of almond milk to make him stop." "So Daddy was always silly like that?" Lily asked in between bouts of laughter. "Oh, yeah. There was another time when he somehow got himself locked in the barn. He must have been 10 when he did that." Dorian continued to regale Lily with stories of when Vernon had done other silly things, feeling a sense of joy at bonding with his littlest grandpup. He felt another twinge of guilt over how unsettled he had been by her earlier. Once more he attributed it to the feeling of déjà vu. He then noticed Lily yawning more and more. "I think it might be time that we get you back to bed," Dorian said, beginning to stand up with Lily in his arms once more. She let out a yawn in response, followed by rubbing her eyes. "Oh, okay, Grandpa," she said sleepily. He made sure to step lightly as he carried her out of his study and back upstairs. It was easy for him to locate the guest room the pups were all sharing. He quietly entered, finding Trevor and Alice cuddled together under the blankets on the bed. Alice was nuzzling her stuffed bunny, while Trevor hugged a small throw pillow. Lily was already fast asleep, so Dorian was extra gentle and quiet as he lowered her onto the bed, tucking her in. He stopped in his tracks to see his smirking mate standing just outside the door. "Well, it looks like you warmed up to her after all," she said very lightly. "Course," Dorian said as they walked back to the master bedroom together. "She's my grandpa, after all." Audrey's response was to lean in close and cuddle her mate.